Hi, my name's Tom Shue, and today I'm going to show you an advanced tutorial on how to create a proper blur on your image if you're trying to recreate a shallow depth of field. Say if you want to recreate something you shot with like a f1.4, f2.8. You can see this image was shot at f11. So let's get rid of this information up here. We're going to hit the eye key in Lightroom. If we zoom in, you can see that the eye's in focus, the eyebrows are in focus, the ears in focus, all the hair's in focus, forehead's in focus, the top of the head's in focus. Now, if this was shot at like f1.2 or f1.4, and we focused on the eye, a lot of the stuff would render soft. Okay, we'd have a nice soft portrait. But since it was shot at f11, we don't have that nice soft rendering. So we can make it look really realistic if we do a couple things. First of all, let's talk about something called a depth map. Okay, a depth map is a term used in Photoshop to create a map on shades of gray and white to create depth in an image. Okay, in other software, I'm a 3D motion graphics artist. They have displacement maps, normals maps, specularity diffuse maps, and you can see that I've loaded an image in a software that will create these maps for you when you're making textures in a 3D program like Maya or Cinema 4D. For example, this is what's called a normals map, and you can see how this photograph has given us some like 3D, some depth to it. There's the photograph. We go back to the normals, you can see there's some three dimension in it. Well, it kind of gives you a preview of what that three-dimensionality will look like if you were to use it with those settings. Now, a displacement map works off shades of gray, blacks and whites, and you can increase the depth or enhance the detail on it. And basically, the blacks, it's kind of like a layer mask. It uses the black and gray information to create something that's three-dimensional. Now, it gives it depth, and this is on a sphere, and you can change it and make it on a column or a ball. But you can see there's like a graphic relief map. Okay, now instead of you having to buy software, we're going to use Photoshop to create that same type of situation. So we're going to export this image into Photoshop. We're going to hit Control E or Command E on a Mac, and that will export the image into Photoshop. Now once you're in Photoshop, you want to create a new layer. Now we're going to use a lasso tool, and we're going to make a series of layers that we're going to identify height of the image. We're going to look at the things that protrude off the face the furthest and work our way back. And we're going to create our own displacement map. Okay? So we're going to grab our lasso tool and we'll start to select things on the face that protrude the most. For example, this eyelash, this eyebrow sticks out the most. So if we want to continue our selections with the lasso tool, we need to hold down the Shift key and we get that plus sign. Okay, so we're going to grab that eyelash. Now, if you make a poor selection, instead of having to redo the whole thing, if you hold down the Alt key, you can come in and get rid of things by minusing the selection. Okay, so there you go. So we've got that selected. Now we're going to hold the Shift key and continue our selection. We're going to grab that little eyelash there. We're going to grab the tip of the nose right here. We're going to grab the forehead up here. Okay, we're going to grab the chin over here. I'm going to grab the cheeks. Okay. So those are probably the areas of the face that protrude the most. So we're going to fill those with white. And there's lots of ways to do it. There's a shortcut, but I'll show you the long way. You can do Edit, Fill, and then in the drop down, choose White. Okay. And click OK. Now, you can come over here and put the opacity at 50%, or you can use a shortcut key. If you're in the Move tool, to get there, that's the V key. Will bring you to the Move tool. And 0 would be 10, 1 would be 0, but 5 would be 50% opacity. So now we're going to create a new layer. So we're going to deselect, Control D to deselect. We're going to create a new layer. And now we're going to continue making our selection. So we'll grab our lasso tool, and we need to include the information that's already been there, but we need to go kind of to the next level of selection. What would be actually the next area of kind of the graphic relief map. So we're going to come through here and we're going to continue our selection based on what we think. And you got to kind of think about what you're doing here. What would be the next thing that would be in that graphic relief from front to back? Now, I don't want to select the lips here, so I'm going to hold down the Alt key because we're not to that height yet where the lips are. Okay, so we want to fill this selection with white, and to do that on a Windows, it's Alt Delete. That will give you white. On a Mac, it's Shift Delete. So we need to go to the Move tool. We're going to hit the V key, and we're going to hit the 5 key to make that 50% opacity. Okay, so now we're going to make a new layer. Okay, and we're going to grab our lasso tool, and we're going to continue. We're going to hit Control D to deselect, or Command D on a Mac. So we're going to hold down the Shift key where you don't really have to. We can just draw this one. And we're going to grab kind of the mask of the face. And this time we're going to leave in that lip area. Okay, and we're going to, ooh, if I can get my mouse to go over there. Working with a mouse is a pain in the butt on a laptop. So here we go. We've got that selection. We need to fill that with white. I'm going to add a little bit more down here. So I'm going to hold the Shift key. I'm going to come down here and fill that in. And fill this chin in just a little bit better. Okay, so we're going to fill this with white. That's Alt Delete on a Windows, and that's Shift Delete on a Mac. Hit the V for the Move tool, and we're going to hit the 5 to give us that 50% opacity. Now we're going to do one more layer here. We're going to hit D to deselect, and this time we're going to grab with our lasso tool. We're going to grab the hair, the shoulders. Whoop, let me start that over here. Control D to deselect. I've got a bad trackpad here. It's giving me all kinds of heck. So here we go. We're going to do this again. We're going to select that hair. We're going to come in here and grab this shoulder. We're going to select the whole bottom of the image. Come up and select all this hair and across the top of the image. Okay. And we're going to fill this with white as well. So that's Alt Delete on Windows, Shift Delete on the Mac. We're going to hit the V key, we're going to hit the 5 key, and there we have, if we hit Control D to deselect, there we have our different layers of the map. Now, in order to see them better, we can come down here and make a new layer and fill that with black. Okay, and to do that, it is Control Delete, and that will give us a black fill, and that's how you do it on Windows. So now that we've got this kind of graphic relief, we need to go in and start messing with the opacities because you can see the difference between the layers. So I probably want the original selection to be a little bit brighter than 50%, maybe 55, 56. And then the next one I will drop down a little bit. And the next one I'll drop down a little bit more. To give us kind of some steps between each one of the layers. Okay. There we have our graphic relief map. So now we're going to hold down the Shift key with this top layer selected, and we're going to click on the layer 1, select them all. And if you hit Control E as in Edward or Command E, it will join all those in a group. Okay, this black layer is just to show you how this displacement map we just made looks. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, as I said, this is kind of an advanced tutorial. We're going to load this selection into a channel. To do that, we're going to hit the Control key, and the Control key is the Command key on a Mac, and we're going to click on that layer, and you can see that it loads a selection. Now we're going to go to the channels, and we're going to create an alpha channel. If you come down here on this little new layer icon, it's going to create that alpha. So with that alpha selected, now we need to invert that selection. So that's Control I or Command I with that selected on a Mac, and it will load in that mask on the alpha. Okay. With this selected, we want to hit Control D to deselect. We want to blur this. We want this to not be so sharp in between each one of the layers. So we're going to go to the filter. We're going to click blur. We'll go to Gaussian blur. Okay. And you see, if we go too much, it just mush. We lose all the detail. And you want it to look similar to one of those bump maps that I showed you with that other software. Okay, so if we come down here, that's too sharp, and we don't want to lose too much of the detail. So I'll just keep moving this up till I've got something that's soft in my selection, but still has some detail. So right about there. So we'll click OK. Now we're going to go back to our layers. and we're not going to worry about this top layer. Okay, we go back here and click on the RGB. Now we're going to duplicate the layer. If you get this situation, you need to go back where it's all red. You just go back into your channels and select your alpha and come back out here. When you click on the bottom layer, that red loading overlay will go away. So now we're going to duplicate this background layer. That's Control J or Command J on the Mac, and then we're going to zoom in just a little bit so we can see what's happening here. You can see that there's no blur been applied to anything. We've just created a map. So now we're going to go into and create our blur with the proper depth of field. So with that second layer selected, we're going to go Filter, Blur, and we're going to go to Lens Blur. Okay, and you can see that there's two ways you can look at this blur. You can see it's faster, more accurate. I choose the more accurate, and there's a preview. So let's zoom in a little bit here. Okay, you can see that everything's blurry on this image, and if you deselect the preview, it goes away. So leave your preview selected, and with your radius, you can see that as you increase this radius, it gets kind of crazy blur where you can't even see anything. So this is how your blur is going to work. Your noise and things like that, we won't talk about that till a little bit later. So if you look up here, there's an option. Okay, it tells you depth map. We want to sample from that alpha layer that we created. So if we click on this alpha layer, it's going to load the blur. Okay, now let's bring this blur up a little bit so we can see what's happening here. And you can see that kind of it's blurred the eyes and the back of the hair is in focus. So it's kind of opposite of what we wanted. There's an option here called invert. Okay, we click invert, and there we have the eyes are in focus, and now the back of the image is out of focus. So we've created kind of like the proper lens blur that we wanted. Now you can control the amount of blur here by the radius. So let's bring it up just a little bit for the sake of the tutorial. And you can change your blade curvature and your rotation. Okay, so I'm going to back this off a little bit. I think that radius is a little too much. I'm not trying to kill it. I just want it to look like a natural bokeh blur from a fast lens. Sometimes I think it looks better when it's under Gaussian blur. Make sure you have monochromatic selected. But we can leave it at uniform for now, but that's kind of the default uniform. And we can add some noise. Now if you add too much noise, you get this kind of crazy pixelation. But like 1 or 2 pixels of noise will look good. Okay, makes it look more natural. Okay, so we'll select OK, and there you have your blur. There's before and there's the after. It's all based on that depth map. I want to thank you all for taking time to visit today, and until next time, we'll see you soon.